So we've been following who's who in the Old Testament. Just a few of the bigger characters. So 2 weeks ago we learned about David at the end of his kingship wanting to build a new temple so he could take God's home out of a tent. And then we learned about Solomon, who was able to build the temple. And learning a little bit more of their character, maybe the good parts of their character and the bad parts of their character. If we remember, Solomon was probably the most powerful king at the time in the Middle East. However, he had 700 wives and 300 concubines. He was a very, very busy man. He had very many children, and his children ended up splitting the kingdom in two, unfortunately, and broke it down to something that was a very small portion of what Solomon had built up during his reign. Now, what we didn't talk about was God didn't mind Solomon having 700 wives and 300 concubines. That was actually part of his reward for being so wise, a gift that God gave him. What the problem was, and what God didn't like about that, is many of those wives and concubines were foreigners. So it wasn't the amount, it was the quality. And so what happens, or what do people think happen when you have a wife coming from, at that time at least, a wife of a different country or a wife of a different religion? She might gain power over you and change your religion. So God wasn't too happy about the influence that these foreign wives had on Solomon. So that started, it was at least supposed to start, the inner turmoil that happened and what eventually broke up the kingdom. So today we're looking at the prophet Elisha. Now, this is it's Elijah. That was a very big misstep because they're two very different people. Elijah is the prophet during Ahab and Jezebel's reign. So we all remember, maybe we don't remember Ahab as kind of a crooked king, but the problem with Ahab is he married a foreign woman. Jezebel was foreign, and she was also a Baal worshiper. So that created problems for God. And so now we're going to learn how God punished Ahab. So we're going into the story upon the conversation that Elijah is going to tell the king. 1 Kings 17, 1 through 16, and we'll take a pause and talk about a few details, and then I'll finish up with 17 through 24. Let's start real quick with Luke 4, 24 to 26, because there's a little mention of this story in Luke. And Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, no prophet is accepted in the prophet's hometown. But the truth is there were many widows in Israel in the time of Elijah, when the heaven was shut up 3 years and 6 months, and there was a severe famine all over the land. Yet Elijah was sent to none of them except to a widow at Zarephath in Sidon." So this is setting up the story. And there's also a point here where no prophet is accepted in the prophet's hometown. And so a lot of times what we learn in seminary is when you feel called to the ministry, it's very rare that you will be called to your own church, because this is indeed a very good truth. And I had a lot of experience with this, because when I went to my pastor at the time saying, "I think I'm being called to be a minister," she just happened to be one of the youth leaders in the church I grew up in. And she told me, "Well, Susan, I don't know about that. You're probably going to have to think about it for a while, because you've always had a problem finishing what you started." So I went, wow, that was not really nice of her to tell me that. It might be true, but I'm going to do it anyway, just to show her she's wrong. And I did. So, that aside, let us continue with Elijah. Now Elijah the Tishbite of Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, "As the God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years except by my word." The word of God came to him, saying, "Go from here and turn eastward, and hide yourself by the Wadi Kerith, which is east of the Jordan. You shall drink from the wadi, and I have commanded the ravens to feed you there." So Elijah went and did according to the word of God. He went and lived by the Wadi Kerith, which is east of the Jordan. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the wadi. But after a while the wadi dried up, because there was no rain in the land. Then the word of God came to him, saying, "Go now to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and live there. For I am to command a widow there to feed you." So Elijah set out and went to Zarephath. When he came to the gate of the town, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and said, "Bring me a little water in a vessel, so that I may drink." As she was going to bring it, he called to her and said, "Bring me a morsel of bread in your hand." But she said, "As your God lives, I have nothing baked, only a handful of meal in a jar and a little oil in a jug. I am now gathering a couple of sticks, so that I may go home and prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die." That's because she was running out of food. Okay. Elijah said to her, "Do not be afraid. Go and do as you have said. But first make me a little cake of it and bring it to me. And afterwards make something for yourself and your son. For thus says the God of Israel, the jar of meal will not be emptied, and the jug of oil will not fail until the day that God sends rain on the earth." So she went and did as Elijah said, so that she as well as he and her household ate for many days. The jar of meal never emptied, neither did the jug of oil fail, according to the word of God that was spoken by Elijah. Couple notes on this, real quick. Every time I read this, I'm always inserted, "please," where he's at the gate and he's asking for her to bring something. And I'm always doing this, even to adults. Please. So it's kind of when we're trying to teach our children good manners, and we kind of look at this and go, I realize that he's God's mouthpiece, but a little politeness would really help back then. Also, what do we remember about the ravens? Or what images did that bring to you? Ravens bringing meat in the morning and at night. It's a little flashback to the Israelites wandering in the desert when God provided them a meal of the birds coming to them. And also I find little images of the Hanukkah story that we find in Maccabees in the Apocrypha. The jug of oil never ran out. It's a very common theme when we're looking at God's provision for the people. So we have this widow, and God makes the widow the provider for Elijah, and God rewards her for that. And she, even though she is hesitant to help, she does. And we see in this widow, who would be considered a very insignificant person in that day and age, she is the provider of God's representative. So she's creating a miracle in that herself. We're going to go to the second part of the story. After all of this, the son of the mistress of the house became ill. His illness was so severe that there was no breath left in him. She then said to Elijah, "What have you against me, O man of God? You have come to me to bring my sin to remembrance and cause the death of my son. course, putting that on the visitor who just showed up and your son just got sick, it must be the visitor's fault. That's kind of like very logical. But he said to her, "Give me your son." Elijah took him from her bosom, carried him up to the upper chamber where he was lodging, and laid him on his own bed. He cried out to God, "My God, have you brought calamity even upon the widow with whom I am staying by killing her son?" Then he stretched himself upon the child 3 times and cried out, "Oh my God, let this little child's life come to him again." God listened to the voice of Elijah. The life of the child came into him again. God listened to the voice of Elijah, and the child revived. Elijah took the child, brought him down from the upper chamber into the house, and gave him to his mother. Then Elijah said, "See, your son is alive." So the woman said to Elijah, "Now I know that you truly are a man of God, and that the word of God in your mouth is true." I don't know why I have a thing on Elijah and Elisha. That just happened yesterday when I was typing this out. Sorry about that. Okay, so we have Elijah giving this bad news to the king, and we just assume that Jezebel was there because in the story, she seems to be the one at fault for all this toil. And Elijah is told to go to the Wadi Cherith. Let me say it better. Nehal Kerith is how you would actually try and pronounce it. It means the cutting brook. So this is in the land that is now known as Jordan. And God is telling Elijah, you will drink from the stream, which is Wadi, a brook, and the ravens are going to bring you the meat so that you may eat and live. And why did he need to go hide? Well, the king was obviously mad at him, right? Ahab had been just giving bad news, and Ahab was told it's really kind of your fault that your land is going to be starving now for 3 years. So of course he's going to get mad at Elijah, and God tells Elijah to go hide. So he's drinking out of a brook, and the ravens are bringing him meat, and then the drought happens, and the brook dries up. So God tells him, go to the widow. I find this slightly problematic, part of the story, because in Hebrew law, widows should be taken care of. The fact that she's not being taken care of and she's about to starve to death with her child means that no man of her family was willing to take her in. So that in itself is a problematic story. So now she has very little, she knows she's going to die, and no man has bothered to help her. So God sends Elijah to her as maybe a way to save Elijah and how to save the widow as well at the same time. So without saying please, Elijah asks for a drink of water and then asks for food. And the widow, even though she goes, wait a minute, this is all I have left. I envision her saying, my son and I are going to have a feast of a little bit of bread, and then we're just going to sit down and die. But Elijah says, no, make a little bit for me, make a little bit for yourself, and then a miracle's going to happen. And it does. The widow and her son are saved. Not only that, the son gets sick, and then the son is saved again. So there are miracles going on. The first miracle happened by the widow's hand, hospitality. It is a miracle that she performs with God's help. So she provides out of her little and saves Elijah from hunger. That brings to the second miracle, abundance. Out of little, much is made. Do we remember maybe the miracles of Jesus, such as the loaves and fishes? Out of a little, abundance was made. And then the third, by Elijah's hand, was healing. So we see a lot of connection with Elijah's story right here and how Jesus performed his ministry. And once again, I just want to caution you, this is not foreshadowing of Jesus' ministry. The authors of Jesus' ministry looked at this story and said, we connect these two together. So there is remembrance here. There's also a really, what not a lot of people would connect is the women in the story. So there's actually two women in the story, but one doesn't get named because she's named in the previous chapter. That's Jezebel. The Jezebel and the widow just kind of butt heads in the story without even meeting each other. So who was Jezebel? She was considered an evil woman because she was a Baal worshiper and a foreign queen. She had abundance because she was a queen, yet she was still not sharing it. So then we come upon the widow who had very little. In fact, she had less than a little. She was not being protected, and she ran out of food. But she gave it away. So the woman living in abundance and the woman living with little, in modern terms, who was winning? Who's the good woman, right? It's the one who knows the power of abundance. And I just love that juxtaposition of the two characters. We learned some lessons from this. And it's a good way to wrap up the story because there are a lot of hidden messages in this story. But I think the big messages are pretty clear, and we just want to review them. The first message, be gracious even when it doesn't make sense. Be gracious even when it doesn't make sense. Say, oh, all the trick-or-treaters are coming to my house. This is really simplified. All the trick-or-treaters are coming to my house and I'm out of candy. This actually happened to me when I was a kid. I remember it. We rang the doorbell. They forgot to turn off their light, notifying the kids of the community we ran out of candy. So we rang their bell. I'm sorry, we ran out of candy. And we must have all looked, oh. Because, we already have a bag full of candy, but we want more. And the lady goes, you know what? I'm going to go get you some. And she went into her private stash of salted nut rolls. And all of us kids who came late got big salted nut rolls. So out of her scarcity, she shared her abundance. And she was happy to make us happy. I'm like, would I do that? I don't keep candy bars around my house, but I don't know what I would do. Throw a piece of bread at them. I don't know. So probably go into Jim's sour candy stash is probably what I would do. The second message, be faithful with the little things. I was thinking at work the other day, I'm responsible for setting up memorials for people who recently died in our facility. And I was going, I have to go down the hallway again to set this up. I'll do it in a little bit. But then I stop myself and I go, oh, Susan, shame on you. Details matter. So I did the extra walking necessary, and I pulled together all of the things that were needed for the little memorial, and I set it up with joy, because the details matter. The next lesson is a super good one, and we all know this one. Help today could be help tomorrow. Don't we know that little saying? Helping strangers means you could be helping an angel, right? Angels live among us. So if you feel like you should help, maybe you should. It could go a long way, and we don't know. We could be rewarded, or we may not be rewarded directly, but darn it, you're gonna feel good about it. And the last one, take advantage of each opportunity to help. Take advantage of it. Like I said at the last one, you're gonna feel good about it. You're never gonna lose that absolute joy when you brighten someone's day. It could be the little bit of maybe giving $1 or $5 to the person on the side of a road on a hot day. It doesn't matter what they're gonna do with your money. That's not up to you. Give them water, give them money, or help someone when you know you can. Take every opportunity you can. The widow that Elijah came to help, helped him as well. She was faithful with the little bit she had. Likewise, we can be faithful with the little bit we have. Jesus spoke a little bit about that in his ministry. This was in Luke 16. He was trusted with very little, and that person can be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with very much. That's the juxtaposition of life. It's about character.